This week we're going to learn about reflexive pronouns, but in order to learn about reflexive, we need to go back and just take a quick look at personal pronouns. You learned about personal pronouns in chapter 19. These are the ones that I made you memorize and you had a quiz on. Personal pronouns refer to a person or thing from the speaker's point of view. And if here's all the charts for them. If you remember ego, mei, mihi, me, I made you take the test until you could spit it back to me. Perfect. You remember that? Okay. So this is what personal pronouns look like. You'll see the reason why we have to go back and just remember what they look like in just a second. Okay. Reflexive pronouns, they come from a verb that you are going to learn in your vocab this week. It's reflecto or reflectere. It means to bend back. And reflexive pronouns direct or bend back the reader to the subject. Personal pronouns don't do that. If personal pronoun says, you see me, you and me are two different people. A reflexive pronoun says, I see myself. So myself is referring back to I, the subject. A personal pronoun says, the waiter serves us. A reflexive pronoun says, we serve ourselves, and ourselves refers back to we. She made dinner for her, and we're in this sentence, we happen to be talking about somebody who's not the she. It means a friend. A clearer thing, if you wanted to talk about yourself, is she made dinner for herself, and herself reflects back to she. So it always goes back to the subject. All right, so I'm going to erase this because I want you to take a look at what the reflexive pronouns in English all have in common. Do you see that? Myself, ourselves, herself. And what they all have in common is they have self or selves as a suffix when you translate them in English. Okay, turn to your chart box, page 49. I would like you to fill in this chart. And if you notice, it looks very similar to the personal pronoun chart. These may, he, me, he, may, tui, tippy, tay. You should be able to write these in without even looking. The only thing that's different is third person pronouns. Okay, the third person forms for reflexive pronouns are different from the third person personal pronouns. Notice that they are identical to the second person, except that they start with S. So that should be a pretty easy thing to memorize. And look at this. It doesn't matter if third person is singular or plural. They are exactly the same. Now, not only that, they don't have genders. The forms of third person are different, so you can easily tell if the she in the sentence refers to the she of the subject. Right? So they don't have genders. All right, so get those on down. And then sometimes you'll see say instead of just say, but it's for emphasis and it means the same thing. So just keep your eyes out that. It does look weird, okay? So reflexive pronouns always direct attention toward the subject and can never be the subject of the sentence. That's why you see that there are absolutely no nominatives, right? So stop and think for a second. Try it in English. Can you make a nominative myself? Let's go back, or an ourselves. So if we go back and we look at this sentence, we serve ourselves. We can't say ourselves or serve ourselves. That doesn't make any sense. Or you can't say myself sees myself. That doesn't make good English sense. So you can never, because it reflects back to the subject, it can never serve as the subject of the sentence. And so there'll never be any nominatives, which makes it even easier because there's less things to memorize. Okay, so since the pronouns for first and second person are exactly the same for personal and reflexive pronouns, there's our connection why we had to do the review. How will you know if the pronoun is intended to be translated as personal or reflexive? So there's 3 ways that you can tell. So first of all, ego, nos, tu, and vos have to be personal because they're the nominative form. That's the easiest one. Reflexive pronouns must match their subject in gender, case, and number. Why? Because she and herself are the same. They reflect back, so they have to so this right here would be nominative singular feminine, and this one would be nominative singular feminine. So one of the things you can look for is does it match the subject right? Okay. Or the word that it is the subject for replaces, right? And in the end, I want you to translate what makes good English sense, right? You or, like, for instance, you or yourself, them or themselves, or me or myself. You'll figure it out. Just when you do it, it'll become pretty obvious. So personal says she baked cookies for her, meaning some other girl, right? And reflexive says she baked cookies for herself. Who? She, right here. So depend on the context of the sentence to know the best way to translate a third person reflexive sentence. It's pretty easy. Find the subject and you'll know how to do that. So if I said, Marcus videt eum, Marcus sees him, right? So this is acting as the accusative. That's an accusative form of the third person singular. Remember, es ihr id. Marcus sees him. That's not reflexive. It's a personal pronoun. The second one is Marcus videt se. So we know that se refers to himself. Marcus sees himself. Okay? All right, so it matches. Now, let's take a look at a couple of these. Puella dedarunt premium sibi. The girls gave a reward to themselves. Puella dedet premium sibi. The girls gave a reward to herself. So these are both in the dative, right? And they're both in the dative, but one's singular, one's plural. Puella dedarunt linum eis. The girls gave a reward to them, not referring back to the girls. So therefore, we're going to use a personal pronoun. Same here. The girls gave a reward to her. These are all in the dative, but it does not reflect back to Puella. So therefore, it can live as a personal pronoun in the dative. All right. So let's talk about reflexive possessive adjectives. All right. Your book calls these just plain old possessive adjectives, but they're actually called reflexive possessives. And when we first learned personal pronouns, I told you that the genitive case of first and second personal pronouns could not ever show possession. And there were adjectives for that. And they are the reflexive possessive adjectives. So reflexive possessive are exactly like the personal pronouns meus, tuus, seus that you've already learned. We don't even have to need a new chart for them. And so they do not ever show possession, but reflexive possessive adjectives too. Reflexive possessives are exactly like the personal pronouns meus, tuus, and suus. And like all adjectives, the possessive adjective matches the object of its possession in gender, case, and number. So here we have meus, mea, meum. These are going to be easy because it's just nominative, singular, masculine, feminine, and neuter. Means my or mine, tuus, tua, tuum. Means you or yours, and su, sua, suum can be his, her, its, or their. Note that this word own is optional, but it's helpful in the English translation for distinguishing whose thing is being possessed. Did he see his own death? Or did he saw his death, meaning someone else's death? Here's the trick. Use suus when the subject is showing the possession. Use eus, which is the genitive, when the one possessing is some other than the subject. Let's work through some examples here that will help you. The first one is is vidit suam mortem. He saw his own death. Now, whose death does it belong to? Well, it's his death. He is is the possessor of the death. He is the subject, so therefore we're going to use suam, the meus, tuus, suus, because the subject is doing the possessing. However, do you see how is nominative, singular, masculine? But suam and mortem are actually accusative, feminine. So how does that work? Remember that the adjective must match the noun it modifies in gender, case, and number. And suam modifies mortem. So even though death belongs to the subject, the adjective modifying death is feminine. So even though we would say, well, his is a masculine word, right? We actually, his in here, it equals the feminine. And that's the most, because death is a feminine word. And that's probably the most confusing part of this, is making sure that it doesn't matter. It's regardless of any other information you may have about the gender of any other nouns in the sentence. You got to ignore the rest of the nouns. Adjectives must match the noun they modify in gender, case, and number. All right, so in this case, we have an eus mortem. And what that tells us is that whatever is being possessed, it does not belong to the subject. The subject is not doing the possessing. So right away, even though in English we say he saw his death, and we don't know in English if we were just to say that whether that death is the death of he or the death is death of some other man. In Latin, we do know, because it has eus, and that tells us that it's not talking about the subject, which is why we use that instead of the personal, right, reflexive pronouns. All right, and eus as well. Eus is the same whether it is masculine, feminine, or neuter. So you could translate this as he saw her death, but we don't know. So that would be totally acceptable. We don't have any context. This is why context is so important. Okay, couple more. Meus pater es altus. All right. In this one, meus is the subject, and it's possessing it's possessing the father, but altus is modifying pater. So that is why altus has to be. So even that is why meus has to be in fact, all of these are in masculine nominative singular. Okay? They just all happen to be masculine nominative singular nouns. So if I said tuus pater es fortis, that is your father is strong. And what we don't know about either of these sentences is the my of the first sentence, and the your. Is that person they're talking about? Is it a woman or a man or a boy or a girl? We don't know, because remember, we're matching to pater. It totally could be a girl. It totally could be a boy. We don't know. It doesn't tell us anything. So what we have to do is we have to do context again. All right. Next one. Filia mea es. You are my daughter. So this, because mea has to match filia, it could be a mother talking or it could be a father talking. We don't know. All right. Marcus suum patrem amavit. Marcus loved. This one we do know, because we have a subject with a gender. Marcus loved his father. Okay, so who's possessing the father? Marcus is. So because he's possessing the father, then we use the suus form, because the subject is doing the possessing here. However, this is in the accusative, because the father is the victim of being loved. It makes the accusative, it is not feminine. It is masculine. It's accusative masculine. So it's not masculine because Marcus is masculine. It's masculine because pater is masculine. All right. Caesar suam urbem. So this is Caesar. What did he do? He conquered his own city. You could totally translate it as Caesar conquered his city, and that makes complete sense. All right. So we have, so who has the city? Who does the city belong to? The city belongs to Caesar. Therefore, we use the suum form, but this is accusative feminine, so these two have to match, even though Caesar is clearly a man. All right. Kaiser eus urbem. All right. Those don't match at all. And the reason is that tells us that the city does not been conquered. It's not Caesar's own city that's been conquered. Caesar has conquered her. We don't know whose city it is. It's his, her, or its city, if the thing owning the city doesn't have gender. So Caesar doesn't possess the city, someone else does, and that is the reason we use eus. All right, last one. Sacerdos suum templum intrabit. So here we see that the temple, right, the priest will enter. We know that the priest is doing the possessing because there's a suum here. The priest will enter his own temple. Right? We use suum because templum, the priest owns the temple. However, suum templum is accusative, neuter, singular. They have to modify. Remember, adjective that modifies the noun must match in gender, case, or number, regardless of any other noun in the sentence.